So every topic we cover, when I get there and I've heard all the wisdom that people have expressed, and I start applying that in my life, I realize, oh, that's what it means. That's the deeper appreciation that I can take my practice to. So I'm just reminded that I can always go deeper with my understanding and appreciation. So I'd like to share a bit of my process of exploring this precept in my life with you this morning. And I've been pondering what it means, how it feels to walk through the world harmlessly. And I realized as I was thinking of that, I had some pretty deeply conditioned associations to just the word harmless that created some aversion. What bubbled up were phrases like, oh, she's harmless, said dismissively. I noticed the feelings, the embodied experience of feeling minimized, discounted, not taken seriously. And as I noticed and took a moment to really feel into those difficult feelings, a memory also arose of a time many years ago when I was in my 20s, and that is many years ago. And I was at the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, with my daughter. And it was at the time when no smoking in public buildings was just being implemented where I was at. And there was a man smoking a cigar right under a no smoking sign. Really, what a bold one he was. And wanting to be a role model of righteous assertiveness for my daughter, I, of course, took it upon myself to point out to this gentleman that the sign said no smoking. And he gave me a cursory look, dismissed me, and simply continued talking to the person next to him and continued smoking. Okay, so my righteous indignation is stirred up here. So I said more loudly, hoping to engage others in the vicinity in shaming this person into following the rules. Please, sir, it says no smoking. Well, the only effect that seemed to have was others looking at me as if I was really off the wall and creating an unnecessary, distressing situation. So, still on my righteous cause, I went to find an employee of the DMV to make this person follow the rules. And I approached the employee, and again, they pretty well dismissed me, saying, I'm sorry, but that's not my job. Please be quiet. Please go away. Please don't cause trouble, basically. And I eventually, gave up, walked back to line with my daughter, grumbling, muttering, you know, complaining to anybody who might listen to me. And I felt frustrated, irate, also humiliated and disempowered, especially in front of my daughter. When I was rereading the first precept that Bill and Susan had shared with us, it says, as we undertake the training not to harm other beings. And this next phrase jumped out at me, and form the intention to bring forth compassion. Well, one thing I know I didn't feel in the situation at the DMV was compassion for anybody, not for myself, not for my daughter, not for the man who was smoking, or everybody around me, or the DMV staff, And I realized that was what I needed in that encounter. I didn't know it at the time, and as I was feeling this bit of rattle, even in being with this memory, I realized, oh, wow, I'm feeling rattled right now. I can give compassion to myself even as I remember younger Lori suffering. There, my sweetheart. You did your best. You're still a good person, as Bill would say. You can't control outcomes. Hold yourself in kindness and hold that smoking man in kindness. I hope his heart has become more open. May we both have grown in compassion and kindness. And may I let go of self-righteous indignation and resentment as I move through the world. And feeling into this experience of how I created suffering in this situation helped me to recognize the importance of loving kindness and compassion in the practice of doing no harm, of being harmless. Just being harmless without loving kindness and compassion, for me at least, can lead to fear. And as Jay spoke about, resentment. For me, a passive aversion, a shutting down, a numbing out, an indifference rather than a loving equanimity. Love and compassion are essential to the practice of harmlessness. As Thich Nhat Hanh states, quote, the 5 wonderful precepts are love itself, unquote. As is often suggested, we might imagine everyone we encounter in person, through our electronics, in the media, having once been our mother. Or maybe if you've had an ambivalent relationship with your mother, perhaps imagining they're all our teachers, or that we're all students taking this same class of life together, trying to figure out these very challenging lessons. What if every living thing, even every rock, every molecule of air, as Lee talked about, were wanting simply to be loved and to love back? How would that feel? And I thought of walking through the world wishing to do no harm, not because of simply the intent to do no harm, but because I loved everything that I encountered, so that I couldn't even imagine wanting to harm them. As I tried to imagine what that would feel like, of truly feeling into that experience, I recalled times when I had just fallen in love. And maybe you've had that experience. How I would walk or float on a street or through a grocery store, wherever, and feel this joyous love for everyone, just wanting to hug everybody I met, wanting to share my joy, wanting everyone to be happy, my heart open and dancing, wanting to feel like I was in a musical and I could sing and dance with everyone. And maybe that's a bit overly exuberant. And certainly we need to apply wisdom to temper and not cloud our minds with that kind of exuberant joy. But it did give me a window of what it can feel like to, as Lee said, love the world over and over again, wishing to move through the world, bringing as much love and kindness as I can, and certainly not wishing ill will or harm to anyone. And then another time came to mind, and it was the period of time just after my father had died, and certainly a deeply sad time. But during that time, I also experienced the world as being more vibrant in a very poignant way. It was fall, and the color of the leaves seemed more brilliant and the sunlight more golden. And I cherished each moment, each person more deeply for their fragility and transience. In my deep sadness, there was also a deep joy in each moment of life. I could love all for our common impermanence as well as our interconnectedness, and hold all without any ill will or wish to harm. In re-experience these times of wishing well and no harm to all, I more deeply realized this is certainly not an abstract concept. I realized how this applies in my current relationships, even in my intention to do no harm, especially at times to those I love and care about. I often neglect to invite in love and joy, or put little Lori aside and to recognize our common humanity and hold all in the arms of mindfulness. In the midst of an argument, this is often hard to do, and I can notice myself shutting down and pushing away. It struck me that even though this may help me not to speak harsh words or hurtful words, my silence can also do harm to myself and others. In recognizing this, I felt so grateful to that dear man smoking his cigar that day at the DMV, who is still teaching me to open my heart. He has helped me to see the harm I have done and to hold myself compassionately and kindly, and joyfully strengthen my commitment to harmlessness, seeing all with kind and loving eyes. This is how I can bear witness to my own life, compassionately learning from the harm I have done and feeling the freedom and gratitude in the lesson. To sustain this practice of being harmless, I need to cultivate the joy of loving everything into the fold of mindfulness, as Susan would say. This is the power we can bring into our lives and into our world. The power of being aware of the sweetness of each moment, holding each transient moment with gratitude, awe, and joy. Cultivating the sukha, the sweetness, and generosity, dana, of love, metta, and compassion, karuna, as key ingredients that make harmlessness joyful, fearless, and powerful. So thank you so much for your kind attention.